Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the REDD Plus and Forest in the GST and Biennial Transparency Report side event. We just make a quick announcement that this is part of a series of events called Together for Transparency, an initiative that we are coordinating at the Secretariat, which covers a range of climate transparency related issues in preparation for the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement and supporting the full implementation. Universal participation is really essential to reaching the objectives of the Paris Agreement, including limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, while also meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is why Together for Transparency mobilizes parties and non-party stakeholders to play a vibrant role in promoting and implementing transparency of climate action and support. And of course, REDD Plus is part of all of that. This year, 2024, is a pivotal year for transparency as we close the chapter of biennial reports and biennial update reports under the Convention and prepare to receive the first biennial transparency reports under the Paris Agreement, of which we already have received 2. At this SB60, the Secretariat, together with our collaborating partners, will do a wide range of events from dialogues, workshops, and information and capacity building sessions, covering all aspects of climate transparency, and we have a full calendar online. So we welcome you to join us here for this event, and which will focus again on REDD Plus. And I would like to invite our director, Donald Cooper, for opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk. There are still quite a number of seats in the front. As I was leaving the door, my wife reminded me, and so I went in the shower, changed out of my pajamas, and actually came refreshed to address you this morning. So no need to worry. And Dirk said I was supposed to make sure and thank everybody for coming out to see me today. It isn't often that I am so blessed by having so many adoring fans just waiting to have a glance and see my smiling face. So for all of you who made the effort, this is my smile. Yeah, I know. It wasn't really worth it. But it's really an honor to be amongst people who have this Nostradamus gift of predicting the future. When we were discussing forests, agriculture, REDD Plus many moons ago, when we had to discuss it in informals back at your hotel room behind closed doors, nobody had a vision that we would all be here today. And nobody, I'll bet you Guyana, who submitted their first BTR, yay, they did not have a vision that by indexing their forests, they would be making hundreds of millions of US dollars per year by simply looking at them and enjoying. It has come from worry and concern to opportunities and something that has the potential to deliver for all. That vision must have been very difficult to have during those days, but congratulations to you on having it. Forests have moved from being this negotiation event that always drags into the second week so everybody could be on stage, to something that is now firmly in the implementation sphere. The discussions are not on intricate and minute details of negotiation. It is always on how does the implementation component go forward? How do we take the past, build on it, and bring all of those components together? Whether you are a party, an NGO, UN agency, a donor to the REDD Plus funds, whatever capacity you are in, it is identifying how that role works and how it works for maximum benefit. Forests remain critical to the goals of the Paris Agreement. As you all know, it is increasingly difficult for us to find the mechanisms to keep temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. Fortunately for us, one of those mechanisms are forests. Forests also have bloomed its counterpart in the oceans, blue carbon. I'm from an island state, the Bahamas, that has massive amounts of seagrasses and coral reefs. And they've been envious of you forest people for ages. But now they say, you know, live and let live. And we watched and we learned. And my country is expecting to start receiving revenues from blue carbon as early as next year, where the revenues will approach those from the countries who are managing their forests in a similar way. So you are not only managing the resource directly linked to forests, but you are spawning others to do the same. And when people are copying you, you must be doing something right. I have 3 messages. The first one is simply to repeat the thank you for all of the efforts that everybody have made. And there have been tremendous efforts. Thank you for the faith that many countries had in making resources available to test out the processes of REDD+. Thank you for those countries who expressed willingness to participate and to take the lead and go through all of those minute things that paved the way for others. Of course, they had a benefit because they got most of the money, but still, they were the ones that paved the way and showed that the process works. I can take note of some of the statistics that Dirk gave me. I mean, 63 countries submitted reference levels, 22 have submitted REDD+ results, 30 countries shared a REDD+ strategy. Remember, there are only 198 odd countries in the entire world. So you are talking significant percentages. And when you look at the countries who actually have forests, those are major numbers and shows that the direction we are all headed in is the one that everyone sees as being the best thing to do. In this context, I want to highlight that even small countries can make significant gains. As I mentioned, Guyana is benefiting tremendously, and I urge all of you, if you haven't done so, to have a chat with them to see how they did it. But Guyana is a small country compared to Argentina or Brazil or Indonesia, right? So if their value is so high, what is the value of the resources that you are managing on behalf of your countries? I would like to ask you, going forward, that we try and bring everything together on one page. Now, whether it's the greenhouse gas inventories or the REDD+ reporting or the tracking of progress in the NDCs, that information is information. It doesn't change because the name of the place where we put it changes, and that we maintain this consistency. This enhances value and also gives us an excellent opportunity to assess how we are progressing. I would like to sneak in a pitch here for the biennial transparency reports and the REDD+ components to it. And to flip this on its head a little bit, most parties, when they discuss the biennial transparency reports under the enhanced transparency framework, they discuss them as taking stock of where your country is and letting the world know. Well, if you flip that the other way around, which is how the negotiations actually went, the BTRs are called for by your decisions every 2 years on a particular day. The first one is the 31st of December, 2024. Not for developing country parties or developed country parties, for all parties. And the second one is the 31st of December, 2026. What it is intended to do is to take everybody's position at that time and say, this is where the world is. So the BTR is more an assessment of where the world is and where the country is. It gives a lot of information to that country on where you are in progressing on your forests, progressing on your NDCs, your Article 6 information, your adaptation plans, progressing on whatever it is you're progressing on. But the key is, where is the world? Do we have to do more? Are we on target? So we are encouraging all countries to produce a BTR this year in time for the 31st of December deadline. Include all the things that are significant to you, and don't include the things that you don't have any information on. The report should reflect your best ability as of now, not the best ability you can buy with your budget or your Jeff grant, but your best ability now, because it's the world's capacity today that is important. In 2 years' time, yeah, you'll be much better off. And then it'll be even better. But it should still be the best one that reflects you today. And since this is the first one, what you are in essence doing is saying, this is where we start. And this is where the world starts. When we send the second one, please, we should be considerably further along. So I want to, again, thank you all. Besides all the wonderful things that forests can do for countries and the world, I kind of find them very pretty. So I want to thank you for looking after something that I find dear, and for showing different stakeholders in the world why they are just as important for the reasons that are key to them as the reasons why they are key to me. So whether you're a business person, a hotelier, a climate enthusiast, the value is there, and the activities and actions that we are taking maximizes those so that the returns are greater than any alternative action, not less. Your actions to preserve and conserve should be highly rewarded, not just rewarded. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to take up some of your time. And I appreciate everyone coming out to hear what I had to say. And none of these panelists, in my view, are going to be a significant enough draw for you to have come this morning. But we will give them an opportunity to say great things. I am so indebted to you. Thank you, and most of all, thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. Great inspiring start. We will run this panel in a way that we inject some information from our side, on the dry side, as the Secretariat used to do it. And then we ask our panelists to fill this up with experience and with the challenges they are facing in the countries and the support they provide to countries and make things available. And we have 2 sessions. The first one will be on the global stocktake, and the second really on the biennial transparency reports. Let's start with the and it's only 5 slides, so bear with me on that one in case you know everything that's on the slides already. The first global stocktake was agreed at COP28 last year in Dubai. It's a decision that guides countries on what they should take into account when making the next NDC. And the NDC is due in 2025, and we know that forests will be an important element for many of the NDCs as they were in the past. So there's many bold actions in that for governments and stakeholders to urgently undertake and to support countries in their efforts in this critical decade we're outlining, and to set up the targets for the next 5 years. Very interestingly, and I think it was very much under the radar after COP28, there's also a very clear highlighting of countries' efforts to halt and reverse deforestation and forest degradation by 2030. And I'm just highlighting the paragraphs very briefly. And you will see that they reflect the nature of REDD+ very clearly. One is paragraph 33, which emphasizes the importance of enhanced efforts towards halting and reversing deforestation and forest degradation by 2030, which is really the action that's taking place in the REDD+ countries and in developing countries with forests. And then there's 34 as well, which highlights the other side, that this has to happen in the context of enhanced support and investment in global forests. And this includes financial resources, technology transfer, capacity building, and should be aligned with Article 5 of the Paris Agreement, which is the article that's really about REDD+. It highlights results-based payments, but also the alternative policy approaches, such as joint mitigation and adaptation approaches, and of course the different REDD+ activities which can help us to reach results. Just linking this also to the adaptation section of the global stocktake, forest is one of the things where we really can think the benefits of mitigation and adaptation together, and where they're experienced together. Key messages, let's say, from this first part is really, to date we have 17 countries that have entered the Lima Info Hub, meaning they have successfully reduced GHG emissions from their forests by about 11.6 billion tons through REDD+ activities, and are eligible to seek results-based payments. The further investment and support for REDD+ is critical, as we all know, to really maximize and unlock the potential it has for climate action strategies, including the financial resources and capacity building. And really a key message from the global stocktake, and I think it's really not emphasized enough, forests were really important in that decision, and parties are expected to consider enhanced efforts for halting and reversing deforestation in their NDCs by February 2025, but also looking into how these activities can be supported. Now, I would like to give the floor to some of the panelists. We heard that it's a key year this year because we have the first BTRs due end of the year, which are basically tracking the progress towards the NDC that we received before. And then the next NDC, they will inform also, of course, the next NDC, which is due in February next year. We like to hear how countries are taking forest and REDD+ into account in the preparation of the BTR, as we shortly call the Biennial Transparency Reports, and the NDCs, and what are the practical questions and challenges for consistent reporting on these measures. Time is always an issue, and we would like to have some time for questions and comments at the end, so I would like to ask panelists to keep your interventions to 3 to maybe 4 minutes. And I would like to start with Syaiful Anwar, who is Senior Policy Analyst in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia. And Indonesia has been, I remember my very first sessions when I was a lot younger, has been pioneering and advocating for REDD+ from the beginning in every process I've seen. I remember very clearly how experience from early demonstration activities informed the negotiations of the Warsaw Framework for REDD+, including on reference levels and safeguards and all of that. And Indonesia also underlined the importance of forest in REDD+ in its NDC. So looking at the global stocktake, can you tell us a bit about the considerations for including forest and REDD+ in Indonesia's 2025 NDC?
Well, thank you, Dirk. Dear colleagues and friends, I think as we are all understand that forest and REDD Plus are integral component of NDC and Paris Agreement. Forests contribute significantly to climate change mitigation and also adaptation. Indonesia, as a country with a vast forest area and rich biodiversity, can provide dual benefit by protecting this area, namely for biodiversity conservation, indigenous communities, and other ecosystem services beside emission reduction, of course. On the other hand, many local economies are heavily dependent on forest resources. So effort to balance forest conservation with sustainable economic development are crucial. Another consideration is that the forestry sector is closely linked to other sectors. Integrating forest management and REDD Plus with other sectors such as agriculture, energy, and infrastructures can maximize co-benefits and avoid conflict, of course. Moreover, forest conservation and REDD Plus can contribute to a broader adaptation and climate resilience goals, particularly in protecting water resources, reducing disaster risk, and supporting livelihood. We believe that the follow sectors will play a vital role in achieving NDC targets and can offset emission from other sectors that are hard to abate, particularly energy. The follow sectors in Indonesia is expected to become a net sink by 2030. And this has already become a national policy, namely Indonesia Follow Net Sinks 2030. Several measures that have been taken include first, improvement of forest protection policies, including expansion of high conservation values, area protecting outside the forest zone, and the second, community-based conservation initiatives, and the third is increased effort in peatland and mangrove restoration. And lastly, strengthening the MRV system for forestry to track progress towards forest-related targets and ensure transparency and accountability in its implementation. Through national forest inventory and national forest monitoring system, including monitoring peatland water table levels. I think that's all I can briefly convey regarding the consideration of including the follow sectors, including REDD Plus, of course, in our NDC. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you very much. Really, I mean, looking back in the early days, aiming to be net sink by 2030 is really impressive, and we're looking forward to help with that as much as we can from all sides. Second, I would like to introduce Ruth Irlin, who is with the Federal Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection of Germany. And Germany has been also one of the main supporters in collaboration on REDD Plus and supported contributions by the research community and experience exchanges of REDD Plus countries over the last decade, or maybe even longer than that. Based on this knowledge and experience, what do you think needs to happen to achieve the global stocktake goal of halting and reversing deforestation and forest degradation by 2030?
Thank you, Dirk. I would like to first make two remarks. It's for the first time that with the decision of the COP28, we have a deforestation goal embedded in UNFCCC. And we already agreed in Glasgow on our wider agenda to stop deforestation and reverse the degradation. So this decision, together with the decision of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, also to restore 30% of land and sea, is the very clear goal indication for the world community till 2030. Having said this, reality is very complex, and the title of the 2023 Forest Declaration Assessment said we are off track and falling behind. That means the global gross deforestation of 6.6 million hectares in 2022 is 21% higher than that what we need to eliminate deforestation till 2030. And this is even more pronounced with regard to primary forest loss, which has been on the increase by 10%. Also, I want to really highlight their emissions from degradation outright in many parts of the world, also the Amazon, those from deforestation. So what we have to do, the IPC assessment report, the sixth one, clearly says that the conversion of natural ecosystems is a feasible option for scaling up climate action, and that it can contribute up to 4 gigatons by 2030. Another option is ecosystem restoration, reforestation, afforestation, contributing to 2.8 gigaton CO2 equivalent per year. So we know what we have to do, the challenge before us. And we have also a very concrete goal with the bond challenge to restore till 2030 350 million hectares of forest landscape. But this is not a decision only by the governments, it's also a commitment needed by the whole of the society to really have this effort going. And the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021 to 2030 supports implementation of those goals and marks the importance of regional flagships, global restoration movement, and multi-stakeholder partnerships, which comprise civil society, science, and the private sector. We have two ways to go for which are important to go forward to address this first goals. One is current policies, which with the aim to halt and reverse forest loss and degradation, but also to include them and the indices and really have investable packages to go along and clearly define what capacity needs are there. And the second way of engagement is through sustainable and deforestation-free supply chains at regional, national, and international level. These can be supported by zero deforestation policies, also on a jurisdictional level, by moratoria for plantations or agricultural products like beef, and demand-side measures and legislation. The reasoning is that 80% of deforestation worldwide is driven by agricultural expansion. And the EU is responsible for 60% of this. So the EU took a step forward in this direction with the EU regulation on deforestation-free products and commodities like soy, beef, palm oil, wood, cocoa, coffee, and rubber, and asked traders and importers to have a due diligence statement and trace along the supply chain the products, that they can prove that the products do not originate from recently deforested land or contribute to land degradation. We support those efforts partnership with countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa through the International Climate Initiative with a number of projects which are in preparation. But it's a wider effort of countries, and in the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration of Forest and Land Use, it was very well addressed that we have to promote an inclusive rural transformation, recognizing the rights of indigenous peoples, promoting food security, and having a sustainable agricultural transformation as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. And thank you for bringing up also the issue of biodiversity, which is and I think I forgot to mention that, explicitly mentioned in the Global Stocktake as well, that activities in the forest sector should be aligned with the CBD Global Biodiversity Framework. And next, I'm very pleased to welcome Kevin Hogan from, or advisor to the Office of the President on Climate of Guyana, who is coming to us directly from the airport. So I'm very grateful that this all worked out, and grateful to the airline as well. And Guyana has made, as we heard already, major steps forward this year with climate change reporting. And also I would like to congratulate Guyana for being the first country that sent REDD+ and technical annex with REDD+ results in the BTR, and the second party under the Paris Agreement to submit a BTR at all. And we would like to know, can you please tell us a bit about the importance of forests in Guyana, including for climate purposes, of course, and whether considerations have started on the role of forests and maybe REDD+ also in Guyana's 2025 NDC?
Thanks a lot, Dirk, and thank you, everybody. I have come from the airport, so I've asked Ruth to kick me if I start nodding off. I hope I won't. I mean, I was listening to the story from Indonesia, which is obviously an awful lot bigger than Guyana. But in essence, it's a very similar story to answer your question on the importance of forests within the country. I mean, to put it in a European context, Guyana is not Indonesia, but equally it's not tiny. It's about the size of the UK. And the forest is about the size of England and Scotland combined. So if there's any people from the UK here, that's the kind of numbers we're talking about. Put on top of that, a very difficult history because of colonialism and a lot of things from the past, where virtually everybody in the country had some fairly serious injustices over the past. You have the indigenous peoples, which is about 11%, but the vast bulk of the rest were either African Guyanese who were brought as slaves in the belly of ships, or indentured laborers who were brought after slavery was abolished, largely against their will. So that is the societal background to anything on any national asset, which includes the forest, because at 2/3 of the, at 85% of the territory, everybody has a stake. And so because of that, 15 years ago, the president at the time said, on the global front, we get REDD+. There's no solution on climate for all the reasons people have already said, unless we look at forests. 85% of greenhouse gases come from fossil fuels, but 15% don't. And the media, general society around the world often forgets that a very significant chunk doesn't actually come from fossil fuels, and we shouldn't take our eye off that ball. So he said a few things. And one of the things he said was, look, why don't we see if we can be a model? We're not Indonesia, we're not Brazil. We don't want to pretend we're bigger than we really are. So we do this with humility. But at the same time, within our society, there are opportunities to just test out all these issues that people say are impossible. How do you deal with permanence? How do you deal with leakage? How do you deal with additionality? How can you do MRV systems? On the social side, how can you bring the entire country with you? How can you make sure the IPLC's rights are safeguarded? And how do you do all of that against a local backdrop, which, as Indonesia described, includes some people who do want to use the forest for different reasons, and then an international backdrop at the same time. So forests, to answer your question, are hugely important to the society, but we recognized that they're also hugely important for the world. So over the past 15 years, that model has developed with help from various bilaterals, including Germany directly, but particularly through the European Union, which was the biggest single donor in helping, and with very many others, to get us to the point today where, as the director pointed out, we've been fortunate to have concluded a results-based payments phase with the government of Norway, where we received $227 million invested in communities. Then we're able to enter the voluntary markets, received to date just over $200 million, all of which is in communities and delivering results back to that point. And all of that coming together is the reason why we were able to submit the BTR, because we had brought enough along together. There are still issues, there's problems to be sorted out. But that 15 years of work, often with international partners, is why we were able to get it this far. I'll talk in a moment, I think in the second question, about the BTR itself and how helpful actually the process has been in keeping people on board. But the bottom line is forests are important because they're important to every single person in the country. It's not just a technical thing, and it was really important to keep the society with you moving forward. And looking forward to the NDC, it isn't actually just a point of the NDC. The NDC is a creature of national development priorities. We call it the low carbon development strategy. Other countries have different strategies. And the NDC is about giving life to that national development strategy. It's not some standalone thing that looks at forests as distinct from the legitimate aspirations of all the people of the country.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for reminding us how everybody needs to be aligned and working together to make this happen. And it takes a long time to get to where we would like to be. My fourth panelist is my dear colleague, Amy Duchel from the FAO, where we have a very, very good working relationships. And FAO has proven over the years to be a very loyal and reliable partner for REDD+ and for climate reporting. Both for us as Secretariat as well as for the countries. And we would like to look at the last decade of REDD+ implementation. And could you please highlight briefly what you have seen in terms of improving capacity for REDD+ implementation in the countries and how this capacity has the potential to drive climate ambition?
Thank you so much, Dirk, for having us here. I'm Amy Duchel, Senior Forestry Officer at FAO, leading the Forest and Climate team. I'm relatively new to FAO, so all that I'm going to talk about, I wasn't personally involved in from the beginning, but it's been quite a journey. And you know, I think those of us who have followed REDD+ for a long time, there are still challenges as were outlined, but there's been a huge amount of progress. And if we think of, you know, how little we knew about drivers of deforestation and forest degradation, you know, just a decade ago compared to now, the notable improvements in forest monitoring capacities, the increased stakeholder engagement around forest at the national level, as was just described by Gian. I mean, all of this is really due to REDD+ and the journey that we've been on together in this. I would like, from FAO side, to acknowledge our partners in the UN REDD program, which celebrated its 15-year anniversary last year, and I see colleagues from UNEP and UNDP here. And that's been fundamentally important for providing support to countries, because the three agencies were able to build on their strengths, their unique strengths, but come together in a very focused way to provide support for REDD+. You know, the Director Cooper mentioned the 63 countries that have submitted reference levels, and I think it's just important to note that represents, in terms of area, a 7-fold increase in forest area covered, which is 70% of the total forest area in developing countries over the last decade. I mean, that's absolutely huge. And you know, there's been, of course, I will speak a little bit more towards the forest monitoring capacities, because that's where FAO, I think, has really provided unique support. And this year's State of the World's Forest Report, which will be launched next month, is focused on forest sector innovation. And many of the case studies and examples in that report relate to REDD+. and forest monitoring capacities, but not only because of the technological innovation. So we know about the digital innovations, but also for the policy, institutional, social, financial innovations that REDD+ has brought. And if we think about, how far we've come just with the digital side, initial reference level submissions relied solely on Landsat imagery. And 100% of the submissions after 2022 mention the use of Sentinel, and 50% the use of planet imagery, which of course provides ultra high resolution data, including to support understandings of forest degradation. Very few forest reference levels were focused on degradation in the early days, and now 60% include aspects of degradation. I should say, actually, it was Guyana who was the first that had that in 2014, 2015. So this is fundamentally important for understanding forest degradation, but also for understanding adaptation and resilience of forest, as was brought by several panelists, including Indonesia. We understand that forests are increasingly under threat from wildfires, pest and disease outbreaks, droughts, floods, windstorms, and this kind of high-resolution data can support our understanding of threats to forest and climate risk to forest, but also informing adaptation strategies. So I think I'll stop with those reflections, but again, I think we do need to think of forests in this holistic way. I like to see that in the global Stocktake there is both the mitigation and adaptation components, as well as in the national policy level. I think everyone in this room understands the range of benefits that forests provide, and the more that policy instruments and planning instruments can acknowledge that, the better we are. Right before this session, there was a session on NAPs, National Adaptation Plans, and there's a huge opportunity to use those cross-sectoral policy instruments to reinforce the adaptation elements of NDCs. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks for highlighting how far countries have come in terms of capacity over the last 10, 15 years. Before going into the second round of questions, to look a bit more in depth into the BTR, we'd like to go back to the presentation a little bit and speak about the reporting in biennial transparency reports, because we hear a lot of misconceptions or people are not really clear how that all works. And the first thing we would like to highlight is there's virtually no change for the technical assessment of proposed reference levels. Yeah, you can see that. It continues to be organized, centralized activity. Normally, submission date is end of the year, and then the technical assessment happens in March. That has been the case now for 11 years, very straight. And there's no difference on whether you want to use that reference level for under the convention or under the Paris Agreement. The report is just the same. It's a separate individual activity. There are some minor changes when you submit the results for technical analysis, which are comparing the outcome of your efforts with the reference level. And I just want to be very clear on what that is. Right? The submission is, before it was with the BUR, the vehicle now changes. It becomes the biennial transparency report, but it's the same document that can be attached in that. The timing, there was, before it was part of the international, or the timing of the technical analysis was before part of the international consultation and analysis of the BUR, which was usually a process taking place in Bonn, centralized 3 to 4 times a year, depending on how many BURs we received. Now, in the Paris Agreement, it will be concurrently with a technical expert review of the BTR. And maybe that's one of the biggest changes. The BTR could be in country, especially for the first BTR, it should be in country for all countries, or centralized, similar to before. So there's a good chance that if you attach results to your first BTR, the technical analysis will happen in country, so experts will come to your country and look at it. If it comes in later BTRs, it will likely be centralized as before. The rule is that if no other circumstances happen, then out of 5 BTRs, 2 should be in country. So in a decade, 2 should be in country, 3 can be centralized. The scope stays the same as basically the Paris Agreement. CMA has adopted the same decision or acknowledged the same decision as before, 14 CP19. So the scope stays the same. There's again 2 experts, LULUCF experts, one from a developing, one from a developed country, looking at the data. And as output, you get a technical analysis, technical report that really looks into how far this is aligned with the guidelines. Key message is really that what you do in REDD+ results links with the GHG inventory, because REDD+ is supposed to be consistent with the GHG inventory reporting, including then also with tracking of NDCs in Article 6, and enhancing already capacity towards the Paris Agreement implementation. I think for many countries, based on our experience with developed countries, or for many countries, having a team of experts coming to the in-country review will be a great experience, will be a great opportunity to discuss, to show how things are working, to show how many people are involved, how many institutions are involved, and to discuss where data can be improved. And of course, REDD+ reporting under the Paris Agreement has started. We received the first BTRs, and we hope that we receive all parties BTRs as much as possible by end of the year, so that we can organize the reviews of the BTRs and the technical analysis of the REDD+ results next year. I'll leave it by giving you some resources. There's a REDD web platform, which gives you everything about REDD, but there's also more general, a LinkedIn community on transparency. There's a calendar with all transparency events, and of course, more on the transparency issues related to the BTR on the website. Yeah. Okay. Welcome. Now, we would like to come to just this as a brief background, and with that in mind, we would come to the second round of questions to our panel. Now's the moment to deep dive a bit into the BTR reporting. And again, we plan to have reflections of maybe 2 to 3 minutes so that we can have some time for the questions from the audience. And maybe let's first hear from Kevin on this one. Guyana, as we heard several times, is very active now on several fronts, and some of which require reporting with different calculations. And at least under the UNFCCC, there's a requirement for the data under REDD+ to be consistent also with the greenhouse gas inventory, and potentially then later with the tracking progress towards the NDC as well. Could you please share Guyana's considerations on this and any challenges encountered putting together the BTR you submitted?
Thanks, Dirk. And if we want to talk about challenges, we probably need the rest of the day. It's not an easy process, but before mentioning the challenges, I do think there is something important that we saw, which was when you look at it first, it's very daunting, and especially having to do these different calculations, align different processes, et cetera, et cetera. But what the people who are more expert than me realized quite quickly is, because of the work we have effectively all done together over the last 15 years, there's an awful lot there already, both in terms of policies, calculations, data, institutional capacity, MRV, et cetera, et cetera. And given that it's all fundamentally based on IPCC guidance or CCC guidance or safeguard guidance, there's an awful lot more there than I think we realized at the very start of the process. And in terms of the institutional capacity, there's loads where it needs to be better. But institutionally, it's strengthened a lot over the years. And I expect that's the same in lots of colleagues' countries too, in part because of technical capacity building. I mentioned what we got from Germany, the European Union, but also the FCPF and others were tremendously helpful. And then in actually putting it together, Dirk and his team, by the way, we got the first go of some of these pieces of advice when he was sharing it with us and other members of the team. But more than that advice, the institutions we had suddenly were stronger than we realized. And so as we set out to do it, I think institutional muscle is a bit like a real muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And by the institutions actually doing the work, we discovered they could do a lot more than we might have actually realized at the start because of the last 15 years. So before I mention any challenges, I did think it was important because I expect lots of other countries, especially bigger countries with way more capacity than we have, are in similar positions. And so the goal of getting the BTRs in by the end of the year may not be as daunting as it first seems. But there were loads of challenges. And for us, the challenges, some of them were challenges for us as the country, but some of them were challenges with the process. Within the country, our MRV systems, for example, are very strong when it comes to forestry. They're very strong when it comes to energy. They're not as strong in other areas. Industrial waste, for example, we have very weak capacity. But one of the first things that Dirk's team was saying to us, and which was repeated here, was, it's adaptable, it's flexible. We don't need to get everything into the very first one. So it's about, as the director said, it's about working with what you have and not with what you aspire to be. So hopefully in 2026, we'll submit a much better one, but we actually worked with what we got, which is strong in forest, strong in energy, and maybe not so strong in the other areas. The other challenge, which is partly on us and partly with the process, is some of this other information that Dirk mentioned is operating to different timelines for kind of historical reasons, the national communication. We were okay actually in the REDD+ Annex. We were up to date on that, but it could be operating at a different timeline. Some of the other safeguard information system timelines. So I think nationally, but also I think internationally, what we need to focus on in the next couple of years is just trying to really align those processes so that you can actually do things as a snapshot on a given day. And now I think the real challenge is linking it into the NDC, and especially because we've transferred from the convention to the agreement and different things were kind of designed in different eras. So that's a little bit messy. But again, as I said at the start, all of it was doable in the end, and the bit that wasn't doable, we'll get around to doing next time. And then finally on the technical review, which Dirk mentioned, we're having ours done. Well, we were talking about it this morning, but we expect in country in around October. We're very aware that we'll find plenty of things out that we could have done a lot better on. But again, the way the team has set the whole process up is not as a criticism of a BTR, but as a way to make it better and the next one better. So our experience overall has been positive. That's not to say there aren't loads and loads of challenges, and I wouldn't want to diminish it either.
Thanks for sharing your experience and the value of challenges. And also highlighting that you have to build on what is already there. And by building on that, you're strengthening your institutions, actually. I think that's very valuable. And maybe we can also hear from Amy how this is working based on FAO's work with many countries and how you see the importance of consistent reporting and what are the main challenges being faced.
Great, thank you, Dirk. So, of course, consistent reporting as much as possible is fundamentally important because it allows for data comparison, for example, between countries and regions, as well as data aggregation at higher levels. And it's crucial for really understanding how we're moving towards these collective goals, such as that laid out in the global Stocktake. That said, of course, countries are using a variety of concepts, definitions, and methodologies based on their national circumstances, which can't always be easily translated into global concepts. And while there have been substantial recent improvements in country-level data, as we were discussing, producing consistent time series analysis to measure trends are still not available in many countries, and for specific forest-related variables. So there's still work to be done. That said, of course, reporting is also done for different reasons. And, we see that in FAO's Global Forest Resources Assessment versus other reporting instruments. And something that we're doing right now, which I think is important, is a actual current harmonization effort between FRA, Forest Resources Assessment, REDD+ reporting, and the IPCC software. I think this is really, there will be differences, but as long as such differences are clearly laid out in terms of the methodologies and definitions used, this is the way to enhance transparency and also avoid mistrust in data and reporting. So as much as possible, we're also trying to support with that. Maybe directly with the Enhanced Transparency Framework and the BTRs, FAO and the Jeff Sibit Forest project it's actually just been renewed and really working to directly support the Enhanced Transparency Framework of the Paris Agreement by improving the quality, availability, and accessibility of forest data. And I'd like to make an offer here that I think Dirk has heard before, but maybe for others, that FAO stands ready to actively promote information exchange between the FRA national correspondents and the UNFCCC national focal points to guarantee the availability of the latest forest resource data for the BTRs. As many of you know, the Global Forest Resources Assessment will be published next year, but data is already generated, and that could certainly support that process. So FAO stands ready to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for highlighting the processes that are already working on that and the importance of trust. And I think for trust, it's not tremendous, or it's important the data is consistent, but that doesn't mean the same number has to be used in different processes. But if there are differences, you have to be able to explain them, and that builds trust. It builds trust in that you know your data, and in that there is consistency in all of that. And looking at that, many people may not know this or don't have a clear understanding of that, but Germany also has a long history of reporting forest data, and under the convention and the Kyoto Protocol, which have different reporting guidelines, which has also its challenge in ensuring the consistency and explaining how things are consistent. And maybe from your perspective and experience, how can countries ensure consistency between the REDD+ data and biennial transparency reports?
Yes, thank you, Dirk, for the question. But before I address this question, I would like to thank Amy also for this bringing together UNFCCC and FAO to support the reporting of parties to conventions. And I think we have been coming a very, very long way. When I started to draw the points for today, I was just remembering our support to FAO in national forest monitoring systems, where we discovered that there are 9% more forest and dryland areas, and we developed the a free tool, Collect Earth. So now we are far, we address UNFCCC, we address as well the CBD and the Coming framework with a firm framework with FAO. And I think that's something which we have to keep in mind, that this is a long journey and that everybody has to go at its own pace. And there is something for countries who cannot invest much, as we started with 22 countries which have not the means to go far away. But also we support countries to have policy approaches to deforestation and restoration, like Restore Plus, where restoration assessment was carried through in Brazil and Indonesia. And maybe in a nutshell, the outcome was that it's not a trade-off between development and restoration. It's something with which can be succeeded by both, which can be successful if we have the right policies and measurement frameworks. And now I want to come to this question you addressed me, Dirk. It is very important for REDD+ that is activity-based. It's about emission reduction, deforestation, degradation, conservation of forest carbon stock, sustainable management, and enhancement of carbon stocks. That this is translated also to the GHG inventory land sector subcategories. But also for REDD class, there's more information and technical analysis required if the reference levels are part of the NDC baselines. So it's question how the REDD fits into the country's conditional and unconditional components of the NDC, if it's a multi-sectoral or economic-wide target. And this all has to be discussed with people, inventory people, with people of National Forest Monitoring System, and also with people who will look after the NDC. And it's not only needs more discussion, it also needs institutional arrangements to clarify roles and responsibilities of all the institutions involved to ensure that data is accessible and consistent. And the consistency is also important between the information reported to UNFCCC and the funding organizations like the Green Climate Fund. It's a stepwise improvement countries can do. And over time, it's important to have the consistency of methodologies and also of assumptions. We move from forest monitoring data to more complex knowledge products, which also inform policies and make better decision making. REDD Plus is not only about emissions and the monitoring of emissions and reporting of emissions, it's also about safeguards, reporting on safeguards. And there, the prevention and conversion of natural forest, their ecosystem services, and the biological diversity is key, as REDD wants to avoid the risk of reversals and the displacement of emissions. So it is important that between the safeguard information systems and the safeguard reports, there's also consistency to the submissions in national communications. I want to make another point. At the moment, information is not required on biodiversity in the biennial transparency report. But climate change and biodiversity are already compounding each other and have effect on emissions as forest fires and pests are increasing. So it would also be important to have this kind of consistency and also include biodiversity in the biennial transparency reports. So that's something maybe we will see if this wish comes true with the time. And having said this, I just want to encourage countries to take the first step, because it's so fascinating to come to more and more information and precise information, which can inform policies. Thank you very much.
Your Ruth, and these discussions always remind me of how we take things for granted, like satellite imagery and collect Earth and all of these tools for time series consistency that were not available 10 years ago. They were just developed over to support REDD and to help us with all of these efforts. I would also like to hear from Saiful on this. Indonesia is a very, very large country with special challenges. I always hear about the island geography or the large number of different stakeholders. And could you explain where the process stands with regards to institutional arrangements and processes in the country that can help to ensure the consistency between REDD Plus and BTRs, and how do you bring it all together?
Thank you. Yeah, I think I agree with Amy and Ruth that consistency is crucial and very important. But of course, not easy for maybe only not for Indonesia only. So ensuring a consistency between REDD Plus and BTR is really a major challenge for countries who have forests I think it's not only for Indonesia, but for countries, especially which has a vast forest and huge forest will be very complex actually. But fortunately for Indonesia, we have developed a national monitoring system. As Ruth mentioned, it's very important that forest monitoring systems over past 30 years. And now it's intended for all parties to use for greenhouse gas emission reporting, such as national GHG inventory, biennial update report, and now PTR, national communication, and REDD+, using a single data sources to maintain consistency. So the monitoring system is developed, and at the end, it's not only for forest monitoring, but for all type of lands. Thus, no longer limited only for forests. So because then we talk about forest and other land use. So the main function of the system to monitor land cover changes throughout Indonesia and to measure wood potentials in permanent sample plots. There are more than, Indonesia have more than 5,000 permanent sample plots have been established throughout Indonesia. So the analysis result from this permanent sample plot are then developed to estimate national biomass and carbon potential. So that's why this plot is very important. In terms of GHG emission reporting purposes, land cover change is used to calculate activity data. Meanwhile, data from permanent sample plot is used to estimate biomass and carbon content for each land cover class, which is then used to estimate emission factor. With regard to institutional arrangement for monitoring system implementation, it was established in early 1990s and has been continuously developed and redesigned since then. The monitoring system is then institutionalized within the structure of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. This institution continues to collaborate with the National Space Agency and Geospatial Information Agency. The organization within Ministry of Environment and Forestry consists of two divisions, so-called Forest Monitoring and Spatial Data Network Division. The forest forest monitoring divisions conduct land use change analysis from permanent plot, while the spatial data network division conducts specific analysis for various reporting purposes, including REDD+ or PTR that will be prepared. REDD+ report and PTR that will be prepared will be submitted to UNFCCC by the DG of Climate Change under the Ministry of Environment and Forestry as national compiler for PTR, and also NFP as a national focal point to UNFCCC. So we have a DG, a special DG for climate change. Yeah, in brief, I can say that Indonesia has a robust institutional arrangement for preparing reports to the UNFCCC to maintain data consistency. Thank you, Dirk.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for highlighting how REDD+ has helped to drive the capacity for other land areas. I think that's also a very important aspect. We're running a bit late. I still want to have time for maybe 2 short questions. If you would like to identify the panelist you are asking and identify yourself as well, please. Any? Gil, Lou? And the second is the lady in the back.
we've heard a lot about how improved capacity is self-controlling. How is improved capacity for monitoring health with performance? And maybe if you have experience from other people, how does it actually help improve your effectiveness and your efficiency?
We will get the second question as well, and then.
Hi, I'm Carmen from Silvera, Carbon Rating Agency. And we talk about aligning accounting in the context of NDCs, PTRs, and so on, but I was wondering about aligning accounting for REDD+ results that seek different sources of finance. And by this, I mean aligning between results-based finance and finance gathered through market mechanisms like Article 6 or BCMs and so on. So the requirements under both are very different. And I was wondering, like, how do you align those and how you make sure that there's no risk of double counting and so on? Thanks.
Thank you. And maybe Kevin, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you for both of those questions. On the first, on performance, like, again, a few people have said, and I think Ruth mentioned, it's hard to imagine where we were 15 years ago because we have taken so much for granted what has happened since then. But 15 years ago, all of our performance monitoring on deforestation, we were not monitoring degradation at all, we called it proxy-based, where we were using assumptions. A lot of them were based on some help we got from Brazil and proxies they use within developing the Amazon Fund, for example, on carbon factors and things like that. It was very basic stuff. But over the 15 years, we have spent an awful lot of money, sometimes with external help, sometimes from our own money, to just continually evolve that. With the Norwegian government, we got a lot of help, including some free satellite usage, to the point where, to answer your question now, I always remind our team that performance isn't just the carbon performance, it's also safeguards and things like that. But on the carbon side first, it's transformed from where we were 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And the ability to calculate degradation, to know about biomass stocks, has equipped us not just in terms of knowing the data we need to know for processes like the BTR and the FREL and things like that, but also, to the second question, that was an unintentionally smooth transfer to the second question, because it has also helped us in terms of looking for finance, in terms of results-based payments, avoiding double counting, ensuring there's no leakage. I mean, to be honest, I think the global problem isn't so much about double counting, it's about whether the money's there at all, and we shouldn't forget that there's a flip side to this equation where developing countries, forest countries, are doing enormous efforts. It's expensive, it's an awful lot of work, and it requires bringing people with you, which is arguably the hardest piece. And if they get halfway across the bridge and the developed world hasn't come to do its share of the burden on REDD+, the whole thing will actually not work. And so, to the point on sources of finance, I think an awful lot more work is needed. We can do it on a national basis because we generate the results, the performance, and we know what it is regardless of who pays for those results. But on an international basis, that's where the real double counting is happening, because people say they're providing RBP when actually they're not. People say voluntary markets are being supported when they're not. Compliance markets are starting to emerge now. So I think internationally, permanence is a two-way street, and it is right that people say there needs to be permanence in terms of results from forest countries, but forest countries also need permanence and predictability in terms of the provision of finance, and not enough forest countries are able to see that. So I think better categorization of what is actually really available instead of notional theoretical availability is a real challenge we should all be putting to the international community in general.
Thank you, Kevin. Amy, anything you would like to add on that?
Yeah, maybe short response that, yes, I think improve time to time the monitoring capacity is give real impact to the performance of forests, because with the accurate data of the monitoring results, we put in the website and transparently, and all society can access the data. and then they will understand that they really should, what I can say, because they know that maybe they are part of the society who make a forest become degraded because of the data show that, and then they can, because of the improvement of the monitoring system, and then they feel that they have to make it. I mean, the quality of the forest coming back as previously. I think that's what I can say. Thanks.
Thank you. I think there would be many more points to discuss. Maybe one thing I would like to say is that I see it as a misconception, and I really see it as a misconception based on the decisions between results-based finance and markets. To me, the hierarchy is that results-based finance is everything, and markets is a subset that requires additional verifications usually, and that's where things come in addition. But it's really a subclass of results-based finance, and I don't see them as separate things. But of course, there are additional requirements in that case. From my side, a big thank you to the panelists and to the audience. It's been great to see so much interest in the topic today. We're all forest lovers, and I think we are in this together. And it's great to see the collaboration on the REDD+ has been very important and strong over the years, and that we know that everybody is committed to continue that work. And just as a final word, maybe we as a secretariat are there for you in case there's any questions you need clarifications on in regard with the reporting or with safeguards or anything with regards to the decisions. Many people have not been in the room when they were negotiated and are not in the loop on the details, but we are happy to answer any questions you may have at any time. Thank you very much. Have a good day.